Welcome, first of all, and I'm very excited to have you on the Happy Conscious Living magazine because after I've seen your TED Talk, you completely took my heart to a completely different space. So I think it's really interesting for people to know. So maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself.
So I'm originally from Lebanon. I was the only one in my family born and raised there. The rest of my family, my siblings were all born and mostly raised here in Canada. So when my parents moved to Lebanon to teach their children the language, that's where I was born. So that meant that I was the youngest by many years in my family. So I just felt like my siblings lived their childhoods together and I lived my childhood separately from them. So that definitely had an impact in the way that I saw the world because I felt like I was constantly surrounded by those who were much older than me.
Right.
The school that I went to back home was a private school. It was a private Islamic school from grade 7 till grade 11. And that's mostly when I experienced quite a bit of bullying for being too sensitive and being too kind and, always thinking that I had to do the right thing. So people made fun of me for that.
Oh dear.
And while going through that, and it's not to put my parents in a negative light or anything, because I know that they were doing their best. My mom and dad would come and visit my siblings, and my dad would work late hours, which was great. He needed to do that. But anyway, in that mix of all of that, I lived in multiple homes. So I'd live with my aunt, my uncle, or cousins or sister, and spent a lot of time. Like when I was living at home with my dad, when my mom would be in Canada, I'd spend a lot of time with my grandma. So I was in different places for a long period of time while I was growing up. So that it made it harder for me to find a constant place that felt like it was a safe space for me to even care about talking about my feelings altogether.
Yeah.
So I just never did that. So I described in my TED Talk the search for a home. And what I meant by home wasn't the physical house that everybody looks for, but that place where your soul feels like it's at peace, where you could fully be yourself and not feel like, if I talk about my feelings, it's going to be a burden. Or if I talk about how horrible of a day I had, or talk about what somebody said to me earlier that day, that it's not going to be a burden on the people listening to me. So that's been my search. And in my TED Talk, you probably want to ask me this question later. So I'm not going to go into too many details, but that's basically my upbringing part. In terms of who I am now, I describe myself as many things. I'm a teacher, I'm a student, I'm a writer. Most importantly, I'm a human, and I'm seeking to make a difference in the world and encourage people to not be afraid of feeling or expressing their feelings or working on understanding their feelings.
Because you released two self-publishing books. The Mind Platter and The Nectar of Pain, is it?
Yes.
Can you maybe tell us a little bit, like, how did you come about writing and how did you come about starting with poetry?
Okay, so writing started for me at 13. One of my friends gave me a journal, a handmade journal. It's funny. She put a bunch of notebooks together and then she made her own cover, like it was from an old pair of jeans. She made the cover, and the cover said "Be Mine," and it had a little teddy bear. I'll never forget that. So she gave me that on my 13th birthday, and I remember thinking, because writing for me only happened at school, and there was a right way to write, and I actually didn't do very well in Arabic classes, the Arabic language class. Not because I didn't get it, but because my teacher just always said, your writing is different. It's not following what I want.
Right.
So I never had that kind of confidence that I can write because, you believe the people that you trust, right?
Yeah.
So when my friend gave me that journal, I thought, this is not for me. It would be awkward for me to sit there and write. But anyway, I did sit there and write, and it was uncomfortable, but at the same time, it felt like this is for me. Like, there's nobody reading this. This is just me expressing myself. And it felt like such a release for me to write what I was feeling. So I was coming back to that journal every single night to write about things. And so that journal became my home that I was looking for. It was that place where, you know, nobody judged me, nobody said or made me feel like it's not the right time for you to talk about this or any of that. So that was my first home, I would say. And then I stopped writing at 16, on my 16th birthday, actually. It was when I came to Canada, and I had just come to visit my family, but the war broke out in Lebanon, so I couldn't go back. And it just hurt me so much that, you know, I felt like before, at least I knew that I didn't belong, where I didn't fit in, but I was in a place that I was comfortable in. It was a place that I was born and raised, so there was a certain level of comfort there, and there was some hope, because I would write about the place that I would want to be in life. But now all of a sudden I'm being pushed again out of a place that to me is my home, and it just felt like a betrayal. And I didn't know who to blame, so I obviously blamed myself, which is what most of us do. You know, I'm in this place, or I'm forced to be in this place because I deserve to be in this place. I don't deserve to be in the place where I feel like I belong. So I internalized all of that, and when I would write, it would be very painful, because I would write about how I was feeling, but I was very aware that there was nothing I could do. I'm here. I'm stuck here. That's how I felt. So I ripped up my journal and I said, I'm never going to write again. And I don't think it was like a decision that I said, I'm never going to write again. Not that, like, I didn't even think that my writing was that great to begin with, right? But I stopped. I didn't want to go back to that journal anymore
because it was too painful.
So I was numb. I would say for about 7 years, I was numb. The only way that I would say I would feel anything was when I listened to music, or if I watched a movie that really touched me, but even that I would start avoiding because I didn't want to feel those feelings. And then I went back to writing when I started teaching. I had a group of 8 Libyan refugees that I was in charge of. I was their ESL teacher at the time, and I saw them going through the exact same struggles I went through, except for the language barrier, because when I came to Canada, I already knew how to speak English, and nobody thought, people genuinely thought I moved from a different province. They didn't think I moved from a different country because my English was good. But these kids that I was teaching had all of the struggles that a newcomer would have, in addition to the language barrier. So I wanted them to know that they did belong here. They did fit in here. They deserved to own a certain space here. So I started writing for them, and reflecting back on the experience, I believe that I was writing to heal my 16-year-old self who came here at the time. So that's how the writings of Mind Platter started. I didn't think I'm going to publish a book. I didn't even see myself as a writer in any way. The purpose of writing was healing for the kids, and it was healing me at the same time. So 3 years after I started that, I had received so much feedback from the kids and from certain friends who saw some of my writings on Facebook. I had started this blog, and they're like, your writing is amazing. You need to put this all together and publish it. So I had already written everything in Mind Platter before I even made the decision or contemplated to publish a book. Mm-hmm. So that was Mind Platter. And then the Nectar of Pain came as a result of the experience of a heartbreak that I went through. So I describe it again. If from my TED Talk you would know this. Yeah. Finding a home and a person, finally, and I made the mistake of building a home in a person, which I think most of us do. At any point in your life, sometimes you build a home in your parents, right? You build a home in a certain place, like at a workplace or in a program that you want to be part of, or anything. You attach your well-being to that place, and I attached my well-being and everything that had to do with me with how much that home and that person welcomed me. And then that home walked away, or I was pushed out of it, or it was more of an imaginary thing for me that I discovered that it never really existed. It was something I weaved in my mind because of certain lies that I was told. So the nectar of pain was a result of me trying to make sense of what just happened, instead of, ripping up my journal again and saying, I don't want to feel this pain anymore. This time I was put at a crossroads, and I had to make the decision of whether I'm going to move forward with feeling my pain and healing from it, or just stay where I am and not feel anything and go through another 7 years that I went through when I was 16. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to write to heal from this. So that's how the nectar of pain came about.
I think a lot of people will be able to relate to what you have gone through. And
Yes.
it's so, well, people think it's easier to just be slightly uncomfortable and just stay in that uncomfortableness because it is what's creating the comfort zone. But
Yes.
when we actually think about it, it's not going to make us happy. It will never make us happy, right? So,
Ignore your feelings. It doesn't make you happy. And that's why the quote that I have as my dedication in the nectar of pain is, these mountains that you are carrying, you were only supposed to climb. When you
beautiful.
keep that pain without feeling it, it becomes heavy, like a mountain. And you drag it with you everywhere you go. If you start a new job, it's there to remind you that you're carrying such a heavy weight, you don't deserve to be here. If then you go through another experience of either rejection or feeling like you don't fit in, or going through an experience where someone doesn't respect you, you're pushed out of a place or whatever, and you keep piling up these mountains or burdens that you have. So I say, if you carry all of your burdens with you wherever you go, it's just going to become heavier and heavier and heavier, and you're not healing, and you're just, if anything, you're slowing yourself down. But if you aim to heal from every pain that you go through, it elevates you. That's why I use the mountain, because it's difficult to think of something as heavy as a mountain. But it's not like if you were to feel it, you're staying at the same level. No, you're not. You're rising. You get to the top and you say, oh, wow, look how far I've come. And then if you, in the future, encounter a similar burden or mountain, you say, well, I've already climbed one before. I've already healed from something before, so I can do it again.
Yes, so it will only make you stronger in that way.
Exactly. And healing is it takes the same trajectory as a mountain. If you're climbing, a mountain isn't a straight slope up. You could be going up, and you're going to have ups and downs as you're going up. You're going to have days where you feel like, I need a break and I'm going to stop. And halfway through climbing that mountain, halfway through healing, you might say, I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm going to go back to the situation I was in. And that's what relapse is, right?
Right.
You go back because you say, this is too difficult. Healing is not easy. It's not easy. And it's the same. That's why I used, again, the analogy of a mountain, is that it's the same thing.
Exactly.
In anything in life, you might get halfway there, and you're looking at your end goal, and maybe you don't see the end. So you go back to your place of comfort, right? You go back to the place that you are familiar with. So you stand in the way of your own healing. And
yeah. So basically, you're saying that for the people that would go into relapse and they're choosing, okay, I'm halfway through, they're nearly there, but they think it's easier to just go back to their own miserable place where they were. So basically, that's, sometimes pain can be, easier to handle because because you're familiar with it, and you described that during your TED talk in a way that you were actually feeling quite comfortable in Lebanon because you knew that place. You weren't exactly happy, but it was familiar. And what would you say to people that that actually have to break free in that moment and just move on, climb that mountain?
I would say that I understand how hard it must feel to move from a place where your situation is certain, you know it, to the unknown. Like, it's a lot easier for people to stay in a certain place that they've developed a sense of familiarity with than it is for them to branch off from it and be on their own. It's like you're floating in the air. You don't know where you're going. But at least when you're in the place that you're in, even if it's a miserable place, there's something that you're attached to. There's something that feels, it's predictable, right? It's something that you're controlling. It's a lot harder to walk away from that and just float and look for another place to be in than it is to, right? Like that's what I'm saying. So it's a lot easier to stay attached to something as unhealthy as it can be than it is to contemplate the unfamiliar, because your brain starts telling you things like, well, you might get to a worse place. Maybe this is the best place that you could be. So your mind starts playing tricks on you, and it's honestly based on your own self-esteem and your own self-worth. So there's something there that used to tell me, you are in this situation because you deserve it. You don't deserve any better. And if you leave, it's going to be much worse. So you're afraid of the unknown and you stay with the known, knowing how miserable it is. But there's a level of, how do I describe this? You know when you have a, like, say you broke your arm, for example. The first couple of days, it's going to be uncomfortable because you're used to using your arm, but then you get used to it. And it's the same thing with any kind of horrible situation that you're in. At the beginning, it hurts a lot, but then you get used to it with time. And you underestimate how much you were able to do with your arm being functional, because now you're adapting. So it's the same thing with misery. It's the same thing with pain. It's the same thing with constantly being rejected from someone. It's the same thing with, being abused by someone. You adapt to it, right? So you don't see it as horribly as you would see it after you walk away from it and go into, float in the air, as I would describe it, and attach to another place or another idea. When you look back at yourself, you say, I can't believe that I accepted this. Through the process of building your self-esteem and value, you're able to say, I might not know where I'm headed to. It might be unfamiliar and scary, but what I do know is that the place I'm in right now is not a place that I deserve, and it doesn't deserve me. So I'm going to walk away from it, and then whatever life brings my way, I'm going to contemplate whether I want it to welcome it into my life or not.
Exactly. And it has to do a lot with worthiness, like feeling worthy. So that correlates with self-love. So yes. How can somebody learn to love themselves more? Because I can imagine that sometimes people look in the mirror and they're just not happy with what they're seeing in there. Like, how do you encourage them to open up to themselves and really appreciate who they are?
So I usually ask, the concept of self-love is very tricky, and people don't understand it because they think that self-love means that you're being selfish. When you think of the people that you love, do you ever think of yourself as a loved one of your own? So loving yourself would mean that you are not accepting for yourself less than what you would accept for someone that you love. And that's hard because we tend to never treat ourselves the same way that we would treat someone that we love. So for example, if you're in love with someone, you do acts of service for them. You buy them gifts sometimes, and gifts don't have to be materialistic. It could be the gift of time. It could be the gift of attention, the gift of listening to that person, giving them some understanding, right? Do you do that for yourself? Because you are one of your loved ones.
Thank you for watching. To see the entire video, become a basic or premium member at happyconsciousliving.com. Happy Conscious Living is a positivity lifestyle magazine that we carefully put together to inspire you to live your life to your happiest potential. Subscribe today to start your happiness journey. Happy Conscious Living. Stay positive, be happy.